Hey everyone, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2021 Grand Design Solitude fifth wheel, we're going to be showing you how to install the Dexter DX Series brake actuator for campers that have electric over hydraulic disc brakes. But before we get into that, let's take a minute, we'll check this out and make sure this is going to work for you. What this is going to help you accomplish, or where it's going to come into play, is for those of you that are wanting to convert your camper's braking system to a disc brake kit, hydraulic disc brake kit, because the majority of the trailers out there are going to come out of the factory with your standard electric drum brakes, right, which work, but they're subpar, especially on big campers like this, right? So by upgrading to electric over hydraulic disc brakes, it makes a huge difference. It'll reduce your stopping distance usually by about half, if not more sometimes, depending on the brake kit that you get. So with this, how it's going to work is it's going to receive input from your truck's brake controller. A lot of the late model trucks, the factory brake controllers will have an option for electric over hydraulic. So check your truck, see what's going on there. But the majority of the, mid-grade to high-end aftermarket electric or trailer brake controllers will have that option as well. So kind of start there. Make sure your brake controller is even compatible with something like this. Go from there. But how it's going to work, it's going to receive that signal. So when you hit the brake in your truck, it's going to receive that signal, turn this on, which is more or less a big pump, and drive hydraulic fluid through the hose all the way back to your disc brakes. This actuator is going to be capable of producing up to 1600 psi. So it is meant to work with disc brakes since they require much higher pressures to operate. This is going to deliver that pressure and make sure that it is a constant pressure. When this thing operates too, it moves some fluid. It is no joke, and it turns on fast too. So there's not going to be a delay like, I don't know if you've ever experienced maybe surge brakes. A lot of boat trailers have it where it's a hydraulic brake, right? And whenever you slow down, that trailer comes forward a little bit and there's a delay there in the braking. That's not the case with this one. It's going to work pretty much the same as what you're used to already, just better stopping power with those disc brakes. So you're not going to have to, really change your driving habits other than having to not hit the brake as soon as what you would with the drum brakes and things like that. So, you're not going to have to kind of relearn your brake controller or relearn stuff like that. It's pretty much ready to go for you. You just get that way better response time and shorten that stopping distance substantially. When it comes to how this is built, Dexter makes really good stuff. They've been around for a long time, and there's a reason for it, and that's because stuff works like you'd expect it to. And this piece is no different. The vast majority of it's made from either aluminum or stainless steel, so it'll definitely hold up. It has these heat sinks in it to help disperse heat, which will give you better performance and allow you to mount this maybe in a little tighter spot than you might be able to with some of the other ones that get a little bit hotter. And with that in mind, as far as some of the other components, how we're set up here today, so, obviously just getting this, you're not going to have disc brakes and everything converted, right? There's some other stuff that you need to do to your trailer to make that happen. One of them would be to upgrade your line kit, right? All the hoses and everything. The one that we're using here today is made by D-Max. These are really high quality parts. These people, they supply a lot of lines and stuff for the U.S. military, and they've gotten kind of their start, from my understanding, in the marine industry with these really big, expensive offshore boats. And people that have $1 million+ boat don't want cheap parts, right? And so they kind of saw that there was a void there and capitalized on it and made really good ends and everything else like that. So that's the kit that we're using here, and this will run back to our brakes. So let's check those out. The kit that we're using is made by Dexter, and it's a really nice setup. This is one of the more top of the line kits out there, at least from my experience. Machining's really well done. The calipers, they have 4 pistons, and so, you know, these are kind of the high performance brakes of the towing world, if you will. But there's some other good parts out there. If you're looking for something a little more economical, but you know, that'll still definitely get the job done and make a huge improvement over a electric drum brake, Hydrostar makes some really good kits among a handful of others. So, you know, you can always check those out as well. So ultimately, if you're trying to do a disc brake conversion, you know, this is something that you're going to need to make that happen. And if it were me, you know, the setup that we have here today, I really like. I would probably just go with all this. I got the Dexter actuator, the D-Max lines, and those Dexter brakes, because everything went together really well, looks awesome, and it's pretty much some of the best stuff that you can get. And when it comes to stopping and safety and things like that, you know, it's up to you how far you want to go with it. But as far as the installation goes, for just the actuator, it's really not too involved. You know, there's 4 wires coming off the back of it. You have your line, and of course you'd have to mount it and fill it full of fluid, bleed the brakes and stuff. It's a lot of smaller stuff that you have to do to kind of make everything jive and work together. So if you're not comfortable dealing with braking components and stuff, you can always check out our dealer locator network to hopefully find a shop for you that can do it for you, because it's really important. Brakes and safety, you want to make sure you know what you're doing. If this is something you're confident in and might have a little bit of experience and get to tackle it yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation for our brake actuator, first things first, we want to mount the unit up. So ideally, where we always put them for the most part is in this front cabinet here. That way it's easy to get to and see. A lot of the wiring's already close by and things like that. So we'll just get the best performance that way. And when it comes to mounting it, I mean, really nothing to it. I just used some nuts and bolts and washers to drill through the tabs, put it to the sheet metal here. You will have to get hardware separately. I just used 1/4-20 nuts and bolts, probably 1.5 inches long, nylon lock nuts to secure everything down. And that's really all there is to it there. So easy to get to and fill up, inspect, hook up, and everything like that. We can focus on getting our wiring hooked up. So I just want to kind of touch base on what wire is responsible for what, because, you know, ultimately, even if you have the same exact trailer that we do, the setup could be different. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're working on yours at home. But ultimately, the colors coming out of this, the wires coming out of this are going to be the same all the time, right? And as far as what they're going to control. So the blue wire, that's going to be for our brake controller signal coming from our truck. So this will more than likely have to get extended, kind of routed up to where our 7-way connector's hooked up, and probably tie into there. The yellow wire, that's going to be from our breakaway switch. So again, this will probably have to get routed up, tie into the breakaway switch up by the pin box. Power is going to be this black wire, so that's your 12-volt power from your vehicle. Could run it up to the 7-way. Just kind of checking things out on ours. We actually have a junction that we can use in this cabinet, which is coming from the 7-way, so that's what we'll do there. Same thing with the white wire. That's going to be a ground. You can run it up to the 7-way if you want, or since everything ultimately gets grounded back here, we're probably just going to run this right to our battery. We'll get our power and ground set up, since we can get those installed in here. And how you're going to make your connections, whether it be a ring terminal or a butt connector, they're all going to be the same. These ends are already stripped back, but twist the wires and make sure they're nice and tight. And you know, you can take the appropriate size terminal that you're going to need. In our case, a ring terminal. On this one, you'll slide that over and crimp it down. So there's our ground and our power. Since it's going to a breaker, I'll put a little smaller terminal on that end. Since we need to extend our yellow and blue, I grabbed some extra wires here so we can do that. I got the yellow hooked up already using a butt connector, which will do the blue one together. It'll be the same. And if you're extending wires, you know, make sure you use the appropriate type of wire. You know, as far as the gauge diameter, the thickness of the wire goes, you can reference instructions. They're pretty good about letting you know what's what. So whenever you need to strip a wire back, you remove the insulation, give it a twist, put this in here, and you are going to have to get butt connectors separately. I'm using these heat shrink style ones because the ends seal up, and even though we're not, you know, really exposed to elements, rather use them than not, but these ends will seal up and keep it a little more protected against corrosion and things like that. So we'll come back with our heat gun and shrink them down. Those wires that we extended, I got them routed. I just pushed them up to where they're running on top of this panel here inside. You can just kind of feed everything through, and they're going to come out in this opening here where our pin box is. I was able to open up our junction box. So this is where our 7-way connector cable meets all the other trailer wiring, and I was able to hook everything up, right? So since the blue wire, the new blue wire that we just ran up here, is connected to the electric brake output, located that on our 7-way wire, and where everything meets, crimped them all together. It's usually blue and a pretty thick wire. And for the yellow wire, that's going to be the cold side, get tied into the cold side of our breakaway switch. That means one of the breakaway switch wires will always have power. The other one will only have power when the breakaway switch pin is pulled. And that's the one that you want to tie your yellow wire into. Moving back inside of the cabinet here, we still had our 2 wires to hook up. The white one, which is a ground. And so I just ran that to the battery that our breakaway switch and everything's connected to, and you know, connected our ground to the negative post there. And then as far as the black wire goes, I did like we talked about. I ran that to the breaker that our truck's 12-volt power is coming into. So that's where it's going to pick up its power needs. Now we can take our main brake line. So this is a brake line that's going to get plugged into here, that's running back to all of our brakes. And we'll get that hooked up. With these fittings, you know, they're brass, and so they're easy to kind of cross thread or over tighten and stuff like that. So get it started by hand, make sure it threads in easily and you're not cross threading it or anything along those lines. And we'll come back preferably with a line wrench like this. You get a better bite on the fitting so you don't round it off. But we're just going to tighten it up. And my thought with these, I'd rather not over tighten it so it don't break. And if we figure out it's leaking, then we'll snug it down a little bit more, as opposed to overdoing it, breaking the fitting, and then, you know, having to deal with that. So, and snug that up. Whenever you are ready to bleed brakes, you're going to need quite a bit of fluid. I'd say probably at least 5 or 6 of these. These are little 12-ounce containers here. So just keep that in mind. And one of the main things to look out for whenever you're bleeding brakes is it's much easier if you have someone to help you while you're doing this. And you never want to let your reservoir run out of fluid, because if that happens, then you're just going to draw air into the lines again and have to redo everything. So make sure that this is always going to remain topped off while you're doing this procedure. Once you have this full, you can take a rag or something if you want, put it around there. That way if you spill a little brake fluid, it's not going to get messy. But the way that you can do this is hook up your truck, right? Hook up the 7-way to the back of your truck and use your manual override on your brake controller. Hit that override. When you do that, you should hear this turn on, and then it's going to start pumping fluid. I like to do that a few times. All right, so say do it one time for a few seconds. This will drink some fluid, so put more in there, do it again, put more in, so on and so forth. And then by doing that too, you'll kind of preload the lines full of fluid, and you can address any leaks. All right, so before you bleed, preload the lines, check for leaks, because if it's leaking, you're never going to get the air out of the system. So address any leaks if you have any, and then make sure this is full, and we can kind of go from there. Whenever you're going to bleed your brakes, you want to start at the one that is furthest away from your actuator. So I already did 3 of them because we're going to do this the same. So this is the final one here, but that's how you want to work, in that order. Furthest away to the closest, right? Closest last. And what you can do, you can take a bottle like this, and I just got a clear hose, poke through the lid of it, and fill it up quarter of the way up there to where this hose will be submerged in the water, or I'm sorry, in the fluid. This is brake fluid in here. And this end, we're gonna put on top of our bleeder screw. All right, that way whenever we open our bleeder screw up and the pump comes on, the fluid will come through here. We can keep an eye on it and everything will be contained. So at this point, you get yourself ready. You got this on your bleeder screw, get your wrench ready, and right now the bleeder screw is closed. And it's really important that you have good communication with the person helping you, because you want them to actuate the brakes, all right? And once you hear that running, or they signal to you that the pump is running, then you want to open up the bleeder screw. While the pump is running, you let it bleed for a second or two. While it's running, then you want to turn the bleeder screw closed, and at that point, let your you let your buddy know that it's closed. That way they can turn the pump off, because if not, and any air gets in here, it's just going to reverse what we just did. So we want good communication. So right now I'll ask if he can go ahead and turn the pump on. I'll crack this open, let fluid go through for a few seconds. I'll close it. All right. And it's as simple as that. And what you're looking for, you can see and almost feel air, kind of spitting through the line. And you want to get all the air out of it. You just want solid, clear fluid that's consistent and everything else. So it usually takes the first 1 or 2 times you bleed, especially on the very back. It's going to take a while. You're going to have to move some fluid. You got a lot of line to get air out of and everything else, but it usually gets easier the closer up you get. But it's still imperative. It's a very important step. So we'll continue to do this 3, 4, 5 times, however long it takes, till we're confident all the air is out. So go ahead and open it up again. Once the braking system is bled and you don't have any leaks and everything looks good, at this point you'd want to put all your wheels back on, hook your camper up to your truck and take it for a test drive. Make sure that the brakes are working good, you're not going to run into any leaks, things like that. And once you verify that, you're all set. So I think they'll about do it. And hopefully this helped you out and gave you some insight as far as getting a system like this set up on your trailer.